So that image really is about the weight. Notice that as we keep going, I don't know how apt it is to say it's like being underwater, but maybe imagine the moment in which you realize at which it hits you that there is no surface for you, that you're just going to drown in there, and no matter which way you swim, imagine how you'd feel at that exact moment. And I'll stop there. So again, notice this is all about this image of drowning, of the weight, of there being no light, of restriction, of suffocation, no matter which way you'd swim. There's no surface for you, right? This is all about that physical feeling. So promoting this very visceral bodily image of the weight of drowning, or not even drowning, the realization that you will drown. And I would, again, touch on this idea because we have been thinking about diction, of the way in which all of these things are continuously qualified by Wallace in the writing, right? I don't know how apt it is to say, right? Which is interesting because immediately after he says, it's like being underwater. And then he forces us as readers to imagine this aspect of being underwater. And not just of being underwater, but being so far underwater that there is no surface. So it's a really nearly contradictory use of language to say, on the one hand, I don't know if what I'm about to say is true, and then telling us what is true immediately after that. So we get more of this same effect of understatement, the use of qualifiers before a particular description, which gets at the doubt of the speaker, the doubt of the narrator of the story, while at the same time promoting, for this particular image involving being underwater, a very, very thorough description of what it might feel like to be underwater. And then we keep going. So it says, where am I? Oh, yeah. So imagine how you'd feel at that exact moment, like Descartes at the start of his second thing. So that is an allusion, a reference to the philosopher René Descartes. You may not recognize that name, but you probably recognize a thing that Descartes said. In Latin, it is cogito ergo sum. It means I think, therefore I am. You probably have heard that. It might be one of the most famous lines in Western philosophy. And that's part of Descartes' second meditation. And in this meditation, Descartes starts with this idea, and he's trying to figure out or kind of question the idea of, what does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to sense things? And early in that meditation, Descartes sort of takes this stand that in this process of figuring out who he is, who we are as people, what life is, what does it mean to have senses, and how do senses play into that understanding of who and what we are. He agrees, or he decides, that he's going to discard as false anything that is subject to doubt. So anywhere where there is a thing that is subject to doubt, he will simply leave that out of his argument in his search for discovering what people are. And that cogito ergo sum is like one of the places where he ends up, right? And, I think, therefore I am. The implication, of course, is that if a person does not think, then they are not, right? They don't exist. But I think the important piece here to understand as far as the use of this allusion, this reference, is that the process is about discarding as false anything that is subject to doubt. And then to think about the way in which Wallace, as a writer and the narrator in this story that he is building, continuously injects doubt, right? All of these times I've been pointing out when we have qualifiers such as sort of, really, even more direct ones like I don't know how apt it is to say blank. All of those injections of doubt, right, would play into this reference of Descartes and make it even more meaningful. So here we see an overlap between ideas related to voice and diction and ideas about image, because the use of a reference or an allusion is image, right? It's using imagery. It's a kind of figurative language. And yet we see too here where it has implications for ideas related to voice. And this will keep going, right? Then imagine that feeling in all its really delightful choking intensity, spreading out over hours, days, months. That would maybe be more apt. So we kind of complete this parenthetical insertion bit with that last statement. It is again imagery, and that is asking us or kind of forcing us to imagine in a bodily sense what it is like to drown. So really delightful choking intensity spread out over hours, days, months. So it goes beyond drowning, right? You can't drown for months. We drown pretty quickly as humans who need air. But, fiction can do this thing that real life cannot do. And that is to make us feel something it is impossible to feel simply in our lives. I think when we are first initiated into understanding what fiction is, it's always within this context of true and not true. And nonfiction is somehow true, fiction is somehow not true, and we're taught that, right? But there's also a very real way in which fiction is somehow more true than reality. And it is in this way in which things, particular features of language, such as imagery, are able to communicate in a way that is somehow more true than true, more real than real. We picture things that are beyond our actual human condition, and we are able to make sense of them and absorb them, and they become meaningful for us. And we see that here. It's really, really skillful thing to do. We shift out of somehow a relatable scenario. Even if you've never been depressed, like this description is so good, you get a really good sense of it. But he draws it out so that it doesn't become a temporary condition, like drowning, right? Like it's a temporary thing that happens, and then it's over, and the person is drowned. Past tense. Well, depression is an ongoing condition, right? It is a condition of living for people who suffer from it. So it draws out over hours, days, months. And then we realize now all of this drowning stuff is not about drowning. This is about depression, right? We're reminded of this idea by being given that extended chunk of time. This is followed with another really obvious reference to an allusion, a reference to the writer Sylvia Plath, so famous for The Bell Jar, a novel, and this reference comes out of that, right? It's like having a jar covering you and having all the air pumped out of the jar. So it's almost a version of where we've already been. And that you realize suddenly that you are under glass. So it's a lot like being under that water. However, here in this case, there's a surface. So I hope that gives you a sense, and notice that we've only looked at a tiny little piece of this story, and I could have pulled out any paragraph at random. I just thought that this one was particularly good to see how what we're talking about in class really works in the real world and in fiction. So I hope this has been informative. Thanks.